I'd like to thank Vishwa for organizing this, for inviting us to be part of their series of talks, and for allowing us to share some of the expertise, the experience we've crowdsourced over the past 30 years at Teacher Plus. And with me on this panel, of course, are three people who have been contributing regularly to Teacher Plus and whom we see as a very important part of the Teacher Plus community. So about today's talk, as all of us know, this shift to online education hasn't been an easy one. It was sort of forced upon us, and we've been forced to adapt and manage in our own ways. And it helps to know that we're all in this together, parents, teachers, students, the broader community. We are all experiencing it in some way. Some of us have coped better than others. Some of us have suffered more than others. And we're all trying to collectively find answers to the many questions that this new mode of learning and teaching has thrown up. So what we'd like to do in the next 45 minutes or so is to explore these questions through three different axes of engagement. And each of the panelists, of course, will overlap in some way with each other because most of these issues are tied together in inextricable ways. So what we would like to look at is basically three sort of themes in this changed and continually changing landscape. And the first set of themes have to do with issues of access. And when we say access, it's not just access to technology, but also access to learning environments, access to the right kind of advice, the right kind of resources, both online and offline. So we will be considering those sorts of issues. The second set of issues that our panelists will be talking about is how responsive have we been and how responsive do we need to be in terms of the agilities we bring to this new landscape. And the third, which is more in the nature of solutions, is adaptations. How adaptable are we, and what sorts of adaptations do we need to bring to this new scenario? So that's what each of our panelists will be looking at through their own perspective, and hopefully, together we'll all muddle through and find some answers. And I know that we have a very diverse audience here. We have teachers, we've got parents, we've got others who are interested in education. And, hopefully with your questions and with some of the answers that we'll come up with, we'll all go away feeling just a little bit wiser. So I'd like to start off by inviting Sheela to start, and then we'll proceed with Neerja and then Simran. So Sheela.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Usha, and good morning, everybody. Thank you very much to Teacher Plus and Vishwa for having me on this panel. It's been a long association with Teacher Plus, almost from, I think, 1990 or so. So I go first, and we have about 8 minutes. So I'm going to 9 minutes. So I'm going to get my stopwatch on and plunge straight into the presentation. Usha has already spoken about the kind of mindset that we need to have, and so I'm going to continue on the same tone. And the most important thing is that earlier we were working in silos. So if you look at the whole scenario of the educational sector, I could see three main triangles, as we all do. One is the learner, who is the common goal for all of us. Parents on the one hand, school in the center, trying to balance everybody, and the educators on the other. But as Usha has rightly said, we have really learned that we are interconnected in absolutely inextricable ways. So no longer can we afford to work in isolation, but the fact that we all need to handle this together and navigate this together is underscored very clearly. And before I really plunge into it, I'd like to sort of remind ourselves for a moment that all of us who are here probably belong to that segment which has a reasonable amount of access to online learning And to that extent, I think we are all blessed, because there could be, or there is, a huge section, and this digital divide has been thrown up very strongly during this pandemic, of children in schools which have very limited access, and so they hardly get any kind of learning at all. So I'd like to begin with some kind of gratitude that we at least have some kind of learning, right? Uh, so I'm going to examine both the educators' perspective as well as the parents' perspective, and see how we can look at it. So if you look at the educator, hats off to them. This is one community that has probably stepped up very, very strongly. And overnight, they were just thrown off the cliff while they were navigating their own homes, their own stresses, accountability to leaders and parents, and taking care of their learners' needs. They experienced an utter loss of control, because they not only lost the control of the physical space in which learners shared the space, and they had a common physical homogeneity in the learning environment, but they also lost the mental connect, because the online learning suddenly became so distant and isolated. And so teachers are, as teachers, and I can say that for myself because I'm fundamentally an educator, there was a huge sense of disconnect. And I still remember my first online webinar, I had so many butterflies in my tummy because I just didn't know how to connect with the audience, right? But as we say, this is the time for change, and this is how things emerge and we do new things. So soon we saw this, or we began to see this as a unique opportunity. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. So while teachers were struggling with trying to adapt to technology and trying to find solutions, I think right now we are at a stage where we are somewhat comfortable with all these areas, and we can really look at how we can take this further. So I feel that as an educator, one of the things we can do is to really relook the curriculum. Do we really need to do everything that we are doing right now? And as a textbook author, I can say the textbook is just a guideline. It's not the Bible. So this is an opportunity for teachers to kind of, pare the curriculum, to trim and to snip off things that you feel are not necessary, and to come to the bare bone. And co-panelists will talk subsequently about assessments, but unless we have our learning outcomes clear. So what do we want to do? Do we want to just be knowledge providers, or do we want to look at the skills that are necessary for the future that our children are going to face? Because the world is never going to be the same again, right? So we need to modify the learning outcomes and adapt our planning accordingly. This is again a golden opportunity for methods, because the mindset is such that there's nothing right and nothing wrong, right? So even if one fails, it doesn't matter. Go ahead and experiment with methods. We have a diverse set of learners, and they are all in different environments. So customization for different needs of learners becomes very important. And as Usha said, it's nice to have a community to share best practices and to exchange notes so that we don't feel alone. And yes, the educator is as stressed as all the parents here. And so urge you to take out me time when you're not accessible at all to people, right? Let's look at parents. Parents have the same issue, right? Blurred boundaries, right? There's no boundary now between the home and the work front. So parents are grappling with stresses of their own. And suddenly there's this new language of Kahoot and Padlet and Jamboard and Mentimeter and Google Classrooms, which parents have to navigate. But and lots of questions, do I need to pay the fees? Am I feeling short? Am I getting shortchanged, right? Is this going to change, or am I going to get back my old days again? So there's good news and bad news. Bad news if you choose to look at it like that, but actually it's good news, because for a long time, the educational sector has been wanting to bring technology. And this has virtually catapulted us into the blended learning mode. So parents and school actually will now begin to be partners rather than being on different sides. It began with different sides in the beginning, but I think parents realize now, and the need to be a part of the school community, a part of the educator's life in their lessons, more as collaborators. Yes, too little family time to too much family time has brought about its own set of power play dynamics within the home, stresses that the child is exposed to. So role modeling appropriately would be important. And also to build upon the child as a parent, what we can do is to ensure that protocols and schedules are maintained, and also to help teachers look at the fact, and we ourselves to realize that it's not just a knowledge gathering exercise, but a skill and application use that we need to look at, whether it's emotional skills, life skills, application skills. So once parents realize this, it makes it easier for the teachers to plan their lessons accordingly, because that's the way teachers have the courage to do new things and to move forward. There's only one don't do here, and that is not to be critical about the school, about the work that's being done in front of your child, because that does not augur well for this kind of online learning. So because there is the teacher's presence is just a shadow. So the parent actually takes over a lot of emotional connect with the teacher that is missing. So I would like to end on a more optimistic note, because I feel that this has given shape to the fact that it's not you versus me, whether it's individuals, whether it is teaching and teachers and students, whether it is teachers and the school, whether it's us and the community, us and governments, or us and the world, wherever it is, right? It's no longer me and you, but it's us. And I feel that it's the mindset change that we need to carry with us, which will help us to navigate this difficult time. So to add to what Usha said, and my co-panelists will expand on this in greater detail, I feel the first thing that we need to do is to accept that this is a reality, it's here to stay. That's how we can, get on new ideas, and to be more appreciative of what is happening rather than being critical. The more the appreciation, the greater the value that we get. Because I sincerely believe that we are right now on the cusp of making history in the world of education. Things are going to change, and they're only going to change for the better. So I'd like to hope that what the thought that I'd like to leave with you is that from this kind of negative, uncertain space, let's move towards looking at the world of possibilities that lie ahead. I'll take specific questions when they come back, but I'll pass over now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheela, and thank you. I could hear your timer going off. So thanks for sticking to the time limit as well. Yeah, so I'd like to call on Neerja next. Mani has made my task easier, so I don't have to reintroduce each of the panelists, but Neerja will now speak about what we need to do to adapt to these new circumstances.
Thank you very much, and let's go dive straight into it. I want to begin by congratulating all of us on this call. Congratulations on doing a tremendous job. Parenting, teaching, nurturing, bringing up the next generation has never been this challenging, and therefore also very exciting. Now, there's a quotation by Alvin Toffler who says that the illiterate in the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write. It will be those who cannot unlearn, learn, and relearn. This is the message that I come to you with today. This is the future we are preparing our children for. Let me name a few professions of the future. Data detective. How about cyber city analyst? How about man-machine learning manager? How about a walker and a talker? How about a genome profile analyst? These are the professions of not the very far future. It's close to us. It is happening in places already. So when we are talking about online learning and the difficulties involved, I believe we have to work backwards. ask ourselves what kind of a future we are preparing our children for, and then acknowledge and internalize the fact that online learning is a very important component of a transition into a future that we have no control over other than adapting it to it quickly. I believe in changing fast. I believe in staying proactive and staying ahead of the curve always. That's the message I've come to you with. Now, when I say unlearn, what do I mean? There's been mountains and mountains of information that we learned in schools, which is no longer relevant. It doesn't apply anymore. There are new planets that have been discovered there, new ideas, new concepts, and certainty, which we were taught in school to value, is not a desirable commodity today. So, what are we telling each other? That you have to give up your addiction to certainty, get comfortable in uncomfortable spaces. That's the new talent. And to give you a quick example, I recovered from COVID. I was in the hospital for 15 days. I didn't know that I would be losing hair in clumps 2 months into my recovery. I had to learn that. And there was information available. So I went online to check why I was losing hair. And it said that it is a outcome of this virus. These are things we don't know. So it's possible today to learn to unlearn, then learn again, and be ready to relearn, because knowledge and information will always be in the process of evolution. Now, what are my three big ideas today? Self-directed learning is one, extremely crucial under the circumstances today. SEL, social emotional learning integration, and what is your adaptability quotient? Not your IQ, not your EQ. It is the adaptability quotient. Now, these theories come up, they are thrown up in response to the challenges we face. There are thought leaders who coin these terms. We either have the choice to quickly understand, be proactive, and as parents and teachers today, our challenge is to stay relevant. So a teacher and a parent have to constantly inform themselves, have to come from a position of knowledge self, a position of authority, constantly learn. Self-directed learning. Why this? Because the future that we are preparing for has changed. The child is more important today. Their child-friendly policies, talking down or delivering or teaching a child is not working anymore. It is not acceptable anymore. And the push has to come from the child. What does the child want to do? What are his or her interests or awareness? So overall, what we need is a shift in a mindset, not so much tips and tricks. That's not as important as the shift here. The unlearning has to happen here. So there are no certain timetables, no certain schedules, no certain assessments. Nothing is certain. You have to be willing to experiment and to change and to improvise. Be on the ball constantly in parenting as well as teaching. Now let's look at these three big ideas one by one. Self-directed learning, the rational, because the other learning is not effective. Children are bored. They are losing steam. They are not able to meet their goals. Are we ready for this? No, but we could be. If we talked enough about it, if we discussed enough about it, if we had panel discussions enough of these kind, we could be ready for it. And how do you teach self-directed learning? There are techniques. For instance, mind mapping, design thinking, reflection, help the child get into a habit of journaling. These are very brief points I'm sharing with you. There's lots more to be done there. This is just the tip, just an idea of what is involved there. Self, your social emotional learning integration. all of us are teachers, parents, we are here, we are quite informed, we would have heard about SEL, but the challenge is to integrate it because we are brought up to communicate with the children a certain way in an authoritative, not authoritative, in an authoritarian manner. There's a difference. What happens is that that sense of connection is lost. And the child is already quite aware and informed because they are active online. And because a sense of connection is missing, you're not able to channelize the education as richly as you could. Now, integration has to happen at multiple levels, at the school level, at the parental level, in the neighborhood, society level. And there are ways to integrate social emotional learning in your remote learning. Now, you could, for example, be what is called an equity leader, be very sensitive to treating everybody equally. You could be leveling up your own competence. I just finished my certification recently. So you have to be constantly learning these new skills, enrolling yourself in classes. You can also help the students to improve their relationships, their sense of responsibility, their sense of empathy with little exercises. You could help them to identify their emotions. There's so many exercises to be able to do that. And finally, let's come to the adaptability quotient. Here, we have to give up our addiction to certainty, as I said. AQ is definitely more important than EQ and IQ. And the techniques to teach this to your children: one, soften your stand. Soften your stand on rules. Second, you can change their routines occasionally. That helps them to stay agile and quick, and you allow the non-familiar, put them in unfamiliar situations, and you become first an adaptable parent yourself. These are the things you could be doing, and the future is here. Here it is, augmented reality. This is what we are facing next. Thank you very much. Bottom line, be benevolent, be kind, be open. Good luck to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neerja. And I think that's a great note to, kind of keep in mind that kindness and empathy become all important in this new game. So let's go on to Simran. I think she's already started sharing her screen. So yes, go ahead, Simran.
Yes. In the interest of time, I'll just start right away. Good morning, everyone. This isn't the first, and it's certainly not the last discussion on how to make online teaching learn work well. So there have been umpteen discussions since the start of the pandemic, and there are bound to be many more, because conversations are critical to the process. But I think this might be a more opportune time to talk about online teaching learning, because what we witnessed at the start of the pandemic was a knee-jerk reaction to an unexpected and unprecedented situation that schools, parents, teachers, found themselves in and had to grapple with, and of course the students. So I'd like to first talk about the macro picture a little, and then go into some micro aspects of the rules of the changing game that online learning is. So I'd like us to think within the framework of two key terms: opportunities and constraints. Sure, we are operating within certain constraints. I think most parents and teachers that I've spoken to so far, I mean, the parents have given up. They're like, it's just not worked, and it's been, no learning has happened, and so on. But we really need to look at online learning, because the fact is that online learning is here to stay. And what is a distinct possibility is a blended mode in the future, which is a combination of contact classes and online learning. So we have to look at online learning, which is what Neerja and Sheela have also been speaking about. We need to look at it in terms of opportunities and be a lot more optimistic and solution oriented. So till now, we have been rather focused on the constraints of the situation, which are very real, very valid, such as the loss of connect between teachers and students, the additional pressure and responsibilities on parents, and so on. But given that online learning is here to stay in some form or the other, how do we approach this new reality? So the pandemic created a huge breakdown of life and schooling as we know it. And when there's as big a break as this, it brings with it an opportunity to revisit and reassess the big questions. So I think, all of us are repeating the same point about this mindset shift, which is needed. And really, for those of us invested in education as teachers or as parents, we need to understand that we need to re-look at pedagogy, which is basically the methods of teaching and the aims of education. So for decades now, educators have been talking about the need of moving away from rote learning. So all of us know, okay, Ratta Mana, the rote learning system that is so entrenched in Indian education, it needs to change. Everybody keeps saying it. Towards approaches in which learners construct their understanding and knowledge. Parents and teachers might be familiar with terms like experiential learning, life skills, social emotional learning. I saw someone on the chat ask, what is SEL? It's social emotional learning. Again, something that in the traditional education system, which focuses so much on rote, this is neglected. These have really not permeated the mainstream Indian schooling system yet. Professor Krishna Kumar uses the term textbook regime to characterize Indian schooling. So textbook regime is where the textbook reigns supreme. Sheela had mentioned that, a textbook is a guide. So, I think the textbook reigns supreme not only for itself, but for the sake of assessments, which are primarily rote learning based in India. Currently also, if most of you would know that maximum schools are conducting objective tests, which is something that many parents are quite unhappy with because they're like subjective answers, writing skills are getting neglected. And there are some schools where children are uploading images of written answer scripts, but there's no homogeneity of experience, which is where discussions of these kind come in the picture. But, is this that assessments are all about? What are assessments if not evidence of learning? We keep using exam, test, assessment, but all of these are ways of getting to know some evidence of learning. So if our assessments are rote learning based, then teaching learning also work in a way to cater to that. And we can't look at assessments as separate from teaching learning because it feeds back into teaching learning. But when we use the term evidence of learning, it really opens up innumerable possibilities before us. And I gently urge all of us, especially parents, because, we are so tied to the old notions of, children rote learning and writing the answers. We need to use this opportunity that Neerja and Sheela have so, emphatically brought out to imagine assessments differently, because till that happens, we'll continue to get tied down to that rote learning way of teaching as well. So we have to move away from that, from the perspectives of teaching, learning, and assessments. So what would this look like in real terms? It would mean challenging the hurdle of covering the syllabus and revisiting and restructuring the syllabus. I think Sheela also mentioned that let's pare it down. We don't need to cover so many concepts. The concepts that we do cover, let's go into depth. Let's use technology and leverage technology to really go into the depth of such concepts. Because that is, and skills, of course, the focus on how to learn, self-directed learning, research-based learning, all of that needs to come into the picture then. So schools and parents also need to dialogue with one another, because till that happens, a lot of schools function a certain way because they know they'll get a huge backlash from parents if they don't do things the way that they've already been doing. So that mindset shift is actually a huge culture shift that we need. So do life skills matter? Is rote learning important? Is coverage of syllabus more important or conceptual clarity? Should a textbook be dictating syllabus coverage? No, these are all questions that teachers, educators need to grapple with, engage with, instead of assuming them to be givens, that this is how it has always been and this is how it should always be. Which is why this break, I'm going back to the previous co-panelists' discussions, that this is almost a once in a lifetime opportunity. We really need to make use of this and have that huge leap, mindset shift or mindset leap we need to take. And then getting parents on board with the vision. And I'm happy that we have parents here, because parents really need to jump onto this, onto this mission also. So a little about, some of the guidelines, if not rules, for the different stakeholders in online learning. What can we do to make it easier? How do we approach it? So what is school for besides academics? It performs the very important function of daycare. We didn't realize that till now, but we know that with children spending so much time at home, a lot of the other responsibilities like peer interaction, socialization, routine, structure, discipline, all of this was catered to by the schools. Now the responsibilities have to be shared between parents and teachers. So that acceptance needs to be there on part of the parents as well. I'd also like to highlight very quickly two major fallacies of online learning. One is trying to move the analog class, which is the live in-person classroom scenario, how we teach there. The same lesson plan has to fit online. It will not work because the format of online itself is very, very different. You can do a lot of different other, maybe in some ways even better things. So we need to have that approach. As long as we're constantly tied to how we used to do things, it's not going to be very helpful. And the second is using technology for the sake of technology. This is a very big pitfall because, in classrooms earlier on, we've seen how teachers use an ebook when the children already have the physical copies. Is the ebook really adding value? If not, then it's a tokenistic use of technology. So we need to look out for these fallacies. So quickly, this is a meme that I came across. Things that I'm doing during online classes, playing on the phone, playing on computer, and there's no blue, which means no learning is happening. This is not the child necessarily, or I don't know, but this is a big fear, at least that parents have, that, is learning really happening? And then there's another one here. What people thought online learning would feel like, very digitized, robotic kind of, experience perhaps. But what it actually feels like is a completely isolated, that's one person sitting in a spaceship. So that's the kind of experience it actually is. And here I'd just like to talk about one word which is key to making a change, which is engagement. We need to engage with learners because learning is not the product of teaching. Learning is the product of the activity of learners. Are our children doing something which will make them think and which will make them learn? So what does good online learning look like for schools? They need to have a clear vision of what is their understanding of aims of education. They need to be listening and empathizing with parents, teachers, and students. They have to be unafraid of experimentation, and very important, we need to share best practices. The school next door could be doing something great, which I'm not aware of. And very critical, reduce admin burden on teachers. Here again, technology can be leveraged, and a lot of schools are now beginning to do that. Teachers, please expect trial and error. This is like, from scratch, you're trying out something completely new, be very self-compassionate, but integrate technology, like the previous two speakers have said, using design thinking, creating lesson plans, differently. So there's also another thing that I can mention. I haven't brought it up here because it's too technical. It's called the SAMR spectrum. So how you can integrate technology into your daily, tasks related to conceptual teaching. Collaborate with your peers and don't reinvent the wheel. What I mean by this is that there's a ton of research already out there. You just need to Google and you will find a lot of information. What would good online learning look like for parents? Please celebrate the gift of time you have with your child. Provide routine, structure, and discipline with a focus on physical activity, because this is needed to counter screen time. Because this is again something parents are very concerned about, that screen time is increasing. But we will have to again come to a consensus with the child, with the teacher, and see what we can do to reduce screen time. A lot of things which we think have to be done online can also probably experiments and all can be done at home as well. And very important, communicate with your child to see what gaps need to be addressed. We are not realizing, but it's the child who is least capable of expressing themselves, who is at the center of it all and needs a lot of attention. Sometimes they won't even be able to voice their concerns. So we really need to pay attention to what their experience is like. So a student, in a good online learning scenario will be engaged. They'll be intrinsically motivated. These 5 C's, these are the 5 C's that you will see them building on: critical thinking, creativity, communication, collaboration, and character. We cannot let go of these critical skills. Also, life skills needed at home and in day-to-day life, whether it's first aid, cooking, dealing with money, buying the groceries, calculation, cleaning the house. There's science there. And of course, technology. So let's look at online learning also as an opportunity where learners are building their, knowledge base of this very important life skill. Because we also, used to feel earlier on that like there are so many technological advancements, but what is the child really, learning in terms of academic content related to technology? But now it's all very, very hands-on, and they should be engaged in offline and physical activities. So for all the anxious teachers and parents, I would like to end with this wonderful quote by John Holt. I won't read out the entire thing, but it's basically 2 words: trust children. Let's empathize with children. Let's make learning engaging for them, and let's trust them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simran. And thanks to the other 2 panelists as well. And I can see the chat was buzzing all through. Lots of comments and, quite a few questions. So if I could come to that, elephant in the room or the tiger in the room, which is the digital divide, which Sheela did raise. And quite a few panelists, quite a few people in the audience have also asked. So, yes, we're talking about the people who have access. What about the rest? Are there ways in which we can think about reaching those sections of society in a scenario such as this? So I know this is slightly outside the scope of our discussion because we had initially looked at only what do we do with the online, right? But I think you can't talk about this and not talk about the other. So would one of you like to respond to that? Maybe Sheela, since you specifically mentioned it.
Right. Thank you, Usha. So yes, as I said, the digital divide has been thrown up. And I would say that both the public-private partnership would be essentially very important and come into play here. Along with skilling of teachers that, that many of them teachers themselves don't have access. So, so it's a 2-pronged approach. One is to do capacity building of the teachers in this direction. And the other would be the public-private partnership to enable device, to enable data for them. So I would look at CSR activities, those corporations and those people who are here. Please do take it up as a CSR activity. It's already happening, right, in many places. The other thing is, of course, the government-sponsored one-to-many programs, right? We're talking about one-on-one or small groups and also one-to-many. So one-to-many would be the national broadcasting system or the TV mode that is happening now through the cable TV system. That is one way. But then there is no substitute for ensuring uninterrupted power, data connectivity, and device connectivity, and skilling. So I would say it's a responsibility of every one of us. In our own little homes, if we have our helpers, our maids, our community workers, we could start a drive to enable that to happen. And in a larger scale, we could go to organizations and corporations to take it up on a larger scale. But unless that happens, there's a huge segment that's going to fall through the gap.
Right.
Great concern.
Yeah, no, I think definitely thinking about clusters, of education where people who have access can actually build those communities around them to share learning, yes, share devices, share connectivity, and so on. So it actually requires us to reimagine the landscape of education quite drastically, not as something that is provided by one teacher in a classroom in a school, but something that is actually shared within the community.
Yes. Yes.
So thanks for that.
I foresee sometimes it's possible to have community schools, just learning centers, which are exclusively doing remote learning.
Right.
So learning will probably be divided into 2 ways, right? A lot of the blended learning will happen online, and school would be a place to socialize and build your emotional and people skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another question that again seems to have emerged from the concerns of those who are in the audience, and something that was sent to us earlier as well, is the question of special needs. And how does the online teaching learning environment either advantage or further disadvantage children who have special needs? So Would one of you like to speak to that?
See, these are special needs, and there was a question about, again, special needs in the sense that if a child is passive, these are all, a range of issues that you are trying to address. So I would say that is proportionate to how well you know the child, and the onus is on the teacher or the parent to identify what those needs are and how best those can be addressed. So a multitude of channels are available today. They may not all, you may not be able to address all of them in a typical class, but then you have access to online professional inputs on that child's special need. Is it an ability issue? Is it an attitudinal issue? Is it a lack of motivation? Depending on that, you would tailor your plan for the child. So you really need to be proactive, and you need to go deeper into the exact need. And then, like I said, there are resources available. It's a question of reaching out, seeking and accessing those, tapping those resources. There's a whole lot of information, knowledge and experience available. So I would urge the parents to do that, stay proactive and ask for help. And since I'm not talking about one particular ability issue, you're talking about a range of ability issues. And therefore, it's hard to give a very specific answer. But in general, this is what I would say. This is what I would urge you to do or suggest that you do. I've done it myself with my children. My elder daughter had a specific need, and I just went online and surfed and searched, and there's a lot of resources available there. Talk to people, pick up the phone. There is technology available today, and people today are very, very willing, because you're not just accessing your immediate neighbor, you can call across the globe many a times. People are forthcoming, they want to help. So help is available out there.
Yeah, but I
Yes,
think
Usha.
again, that begs the question, sorry, go ahead, Sheela. But
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in with what, please continue and then I'll.
No, I just wanted to, and this is perhaps something you can address when you jump in, Sheela, is, again, we're overlaying this on a scenario where many parents, many caregivers don't have either the access or the understanding to identify these specific problems, right? So even to reach out, even to ask questions, you have to start at a position of knowledge. So yes, so Sheela, go ahead.
Yeah. So I just wanted to add to what Neerja said, and to link, what you mentioned just now about not having idea. So the first thing here I would say is to most of the special needs, if it's coming from the teacher's angle, right? I don't know whether the person who's asked the question is a parent or a teacher, but let's look at both, because they are both part of the problem on hand, or the issue on hand. So an individual educational plan is an absolute must when you're working with special needs students, right? So, and what happens is, when we are on an online mode and working with children with any kind of special needs, be it dyslexia, be it ADHD, be it autism, or any of those on the spectrum, right? Then what we actually miss is the sensorial input that we have in a specialized way in a school setup. So this is where the school and the parent, or the educator and the parent, need to partner, right? So it becomes a kind of inclusive education. So the sensorial inputs that are required are given in the home scenario, and the teacher needs to be aware of it when she's customizing the individual education plan. And the other interaction or the technical part of it can be done as far as possible online. But the partnership between parents and teachers here becomes important, right? And periodic check-in on the part of the educator to see how they are moving forward. They do well with visual clues. A lot of special need kids function very well with visual clues. So technology is highly, sort of useful in that manner.
Right.
So it has to be a combination.
And I realize that we're fast running out of time and there are lots of questions, but I would like us to focus a little bit on, again, another big issue that perhaps has come up indirectly is the question of learning ethics, right? And I think one concern that a lot of teachers have is that while children are becoming very adept at using technology, very often what they lack is the understanding of how it should be used and how content should be used. So you have a lot of plagiarism, you have a lot of copying, you have sharing sometimes of inappropriate resources and so on. And I do want to to ask both Simran and Neerja particularly, because you did say we have to trust the child, and of course I'm not coming from a position of suspicion at all, but how does one manage these sorts of impulses, right? Among children and among adults. I mean, I teach at the university level, and this is just as much of a problem in that space as well.
See, Usha, it's a time for everybody to be proactive. So even for the teacher has to learn how to tell plagiarism grammarly, or there are umpty number of tools out there. You have to be able to say, is it 3%, 20%, 10%, whatever it is. So this is a system that the teacher has to now evolve. So learn, unlearn, relearn, and that's the process. So that's one. The other is, yes, especially quotation or education or using material that we have to start talking about and instilling, and then, injecting the system and insisting that people do that. And there's the concept of a public domain, the concept of pictures that you may not use. We so freely cut and paste. So these are evolving issues. And it's people like us, this panel discussion, this is where you reiterate that this is important, and teachers have to first learn and then transmit to the students.
If I may add to what Neerja said, of course, besides educating children on and given that information is available on the World Wide Web, I think what teachers can also do is design tasks in a way that require the child to creatively, even if I have to cull material from different sources, I'm doing it in a creative manner. I have to apply myself there. So research isn't just a matter of going to Wikipedia and copy pasting. That is not how the task should be designed in the first place. It should be designed in a way that I'm stretched. I need to imagine something of my own, contribute my own critique of whatever I'm looking at. Of course, I mean, looking at this on a spectrum and different levels of difficulty for different age groups. But I think that is an aspect that needs to come into how we design tasks for students, allowing for creativity and innovation.
Right. And so we have 2 minutes left exactly. And I just want each of you to say one thing that you could provide as a takeaway to this question. How do you keep parents motivated in this scenario? And this is a question from the audience. Yeah, so Simran, since you're on screen, you can go first.
I think parents, what I personally really strongly feel is in India, we need to divorce ourselves from how we've experienced schooling and education. I think Neerja's presentation talks a lot about the VUCA world. If people aren't familiar, VUCA, the world that we are living in is volatile, it's complex, it's uncertain, it's ambiguous. Things are changing, whether it's the economy, whether it's technology, it's all moving at lightning speed. So I think parents are cognizant of this and they are nervous about it. But at the same time, they don't want to let go of that whole rote learning, scenario, which is why I mentioned in my presentation that, depending on I've chosen the school. In India, we have school choice. We are choosing schools for our children. So, that choice and then what happens in that school, there should be a complete clarity. I think that is when parents will be at ease. If I'm not all right with rote learning, I'll be choosing a school where rote learning isn't encouraged. I mean, I understand that there are contexts and there are situations where parents would want to be, they would feel safer with a more traditional mode. But I think, choosing the right school and then continuing to dialogue with the school. And here is where an open door policy from the school and the teachers' end is needed. That dialogue is critical. I think that would, and trusting the teachers as well and the school once you've chosen your school. So that's what, my opinion is.
Okay. Thanks, Simran. Sheela?
Do we go with the same takeaway for parents?
Yes.
Okay. So I could say with all my gray hair at this time, right, that we worry too much. So I would urge parents, worry less. The future is not all that despondent as it looks. The kids will study, they will get a job, they will do well for themselves. So long as we are encouraging them to learn and not just making the teachers teach. So this is, I feel that children should be taught how, not taught, but made to learn rather than teach, right? So as parents, if you can partner with your school and have this belief yourself that it's okay if my child doesn't have tons of knowledge, but he knows how to find that information when he needs it. Simran's already covered that, but I think this mindset is something that as parents, we really need to build in ourselves. Worry less, the future is good.
Thanks, Sheela. And last word to Neerja in half a minute.
Yes, so my last words are this, that dear parents and teachers, prepare yourselves for surprises. There will be surprises ahead, and give up this desire for control and credit and this notion that your child is an extension of you. Children today are individuating at a very rapid, to different degrees. And they're not just products of what we are putting into them as parents. They're a product of a whole lot of other inputs from the environment, from the digital environment. There's a lot of information that they have access to. So just take it easy. And I believe they all come with their own destinies written, and they are also guided spirits, just like you and me. Those would be my last words. Thank you very much.
So I do see another raised hand. Lakshmi Mittal, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, so my question was that we look at assessments as an evidence of learning. So from a teacher perspective, that's how we assess if a child has absorbed what we have taught or not. But from the child's perspective, they tend to look at it as a stressful activity, maybe because if they don't do well, they're scolded at home, probably the teacher scolds. So the reason why I even got this question was just yesterday I was talking to a grade 2 student, and in the context of the book that we were reading, she mentioned that she would love to be in a situation where she has no homework, no tests to do. She just wants to be left alone with nothing to do. And that was kind of disturbing because that child was not looking at the various subjects in school as a way to learn something new, but it was more like she was being judged for her capabilities. And so she just wanted to get away from all of that. How do we help such children? How do we help parents to change their views of marks and grades? As a teacher, what can we do? Bring about change.
So I would ask both Simran and Sheela to jump in to answer that. Simran, since you talked about assessment, would you like to go first?
Yeah, Simran, you want to go first as assessment?
Yeah. Sure. So, I think while you were speaking, what came to my mind was, I'm not sure, but very often it's because of the high stake nature of assessments that this fear gets instilled. Actually, if we look at it, we know, educators know assessment for learning, assessment of learning, assessment as learning. We have these three variations, but we rarely use assessment as learning. We don't really involve it in the learning process, so to speak. So I think if we widen our scope of, using these three forms of assessment, one, second, having a variation in the kind of evidence of learning we are looking for. Does it always have to be a certain written format? Can children make a short video talking about it, those of them who like to speak? I mean, there are different ways, especially now, which is why, we're constantly saying it's a break. So let's use these different modes. Let's give them options. You want to make a video, you want to make a song about it, you want to write an acrostic poem about it. What do you want to do? In what way do you want to, show that you've understood or you have something to say about this, piece that we were trying to explore? I think that might help. That will lower the high stake value of assessments, and that, whole like, oh God, another test, I'm going to get another grade, because every time I get a grade, every time I get marks, I'm being judged. I mean, we as adults would hate that happening with ourselves too. I mean, adults in the corporate world, let's say they have the appraisal once a year. Kids go through appraisals all the time. I mean, it is a bit much. So I don't know do we need to share the grade each time? Can't it be feedback for the teachers? Because very often assessment is not only feedback on how well the child has learned, it's also about how well the teacher has taught. I mean, there should be a balance of both these perspectives. So I think this again is a mindset shift, but I think this is needed, and that high stake nature, that the way assessments are looked at as a big headache, and that fear gets instilled in children, we need to sort of reduce that, and also talk to children that it's all right if you didn't, it's not the end of the world. Because that's the other approach that even parents then are like, why did you get 9 on 10? Why not 10 on 10? We need to stop having these kinds of conversations and really ease the pressure and look at learning as something much broader, wider. It's a lifelong journey. Like Neerja was saying, we need to be lifelong learners. Why are we so focused on that one test and that one, and putting children off the learning process completely? So yeah, that's what I'd like to share.
Yeah, so clearly, we got Simran on her hobby horse. Yes, yeah. Sheela, would you like to and I realize we have 3 more hands up, but if you'd like to quickly add to that.
Yeah, so just a quick one, because I feel that as a society, as a group, as a community, we are always celebrating successes. And I feel if we have to make this easier, we also need to, in a strange way, celebrate our failures. So one of the things that I've done in my classes is to have a class devoted exclusively to what is it that we didn't do well. Let's talk about it. It doesn't matter, because when we didn't do well, it's a plus, because you'll do well the next time. So, to build in the mind of the children or the students, whatever be the age group, that it's very easy to say they're stepping stones to success, but unless we actually demonstrate it and we show this in our classrooms, it's not going to happen. So I'm a great one for celebrating failures.
Thank you. Something really to remember. So let's go to the next questioner, Anjali Lal Gupta. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so I'm just asking, I want to ask just a very basic question. There have been families that have lost loved ones, and some of those kids have to attend school, and they're obviously not in the right frame of mind. So this kind of overemphasis on, classroom learning and assessment, this can get to people, and kids are particularly vulnerable. So, what do policymakers, what should they think of when you have to tackle grieving families, grieving students, grieving children? And all the panelists have mentioned this, that life itself is a teacher, but somehow when it comes to our policy in schooling, we don't seem to give enough credit to life. Somebody who's grappling with grief at home is learning a lot. So I just wanted your thoughts on that.
May I answer this, please?
Yes.
WishwaTalks has come up with a session by Mr. Kalyana Ramasundram and Ms. Lata, and we will do another session specifically addressing children and how teachers should deal with this situation because we have noticed in this very difficult period, families have lost many family members, and the grief is very sudden, and there's no time to even understand what is happening around them. So we will come out with another session for this. Thank you.
Yeah, Neerja, would you like to add anything to that? Since you spoke specifically about, yeah.
Yes, Usha. See, the thing is that when a child expresses grief, discomfort, the usual thing used to be roya nahi karte, be strong, and a kind of a dismissal of, or not a validation of that person's experience. But again, now that has changed and it's changing. So the more we talk about it and the more we normalize this, that a child's grief has to be acknowledged. And remember, one is the losses, one is the uncertainty. There is a very insidious grief that each one of us sitting here is also suffering from. And that is a grief about the uncertainties that we face. By and large, a lot of organizations, a lot of companies, a lot of institutions in the recent past have been quite empathetic. They have changed their approach and they have softened. But at home, the thing to do would be to acknowledge the child's feelings and let the child talk, express himself, herself, even if they want to shout or express themselves in a more wild, a forceful manner than you are used to. That is what I would recommend. And remember, one last thing, that today a mighty parent and a mighty teacher is one that gives their child permission to be at their worst in their presence. Once upon a time, it was unthinkable, but that is what we need to extend to our children today. Yes, Usha, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hegde, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, good afternoon. Let me take this opportunity to I'm feeling so happy that I'm a part of this session today. And Ms. Usha Raman and all, I've been a big fan of y'all because I've been reading Teacher Plus. It's been like my Bible. So let me take this opportunity to tell this first to all of you all here, the eminent panelists here. And my question is regarding rote learning. How do you think parents are prepared for this, to get away with this rote learning? Because it is embedded in a DNA, I must tell you, with our Indian education system. So do you think it's going to be an easy thing? And with the NEP and all coming, how prepared are the teachers? How prepared are the parents to get away with this rote learning and going with more of application based, that's what my question is.
Yes, who would like to take that? Sheela?
Okay, so NEP 2020, in fact, has been is coming as a breath of fresh air, and it's going to enable and probably I don't want to use the word mandate, but yes, it could almost mandate going off the rote learning system, because it talks about blurring the boundaries, it talks about interdisciplinary approach, it talks about skills, it talks about internships at a very early age, right from grade 6. So the NEP, if it is actually implemented, of course, as we know, there's a huge difference between policy and action. But if it's implemented, then NEP is the step to 2020 is the step in the right direction. And delivery systems and methodology will change. It will become more, application based, and there would be a need. There would be almost a compulsion for the educator community. Of course, many of them would do it willingly, but those who wouldn't would need to do it forcefully to move away from the rote learning system. So there would be onus on the learner to take charge of his learning, self-directed learning, as Neerja said, in those places where it's possible. And in other places, there would be methodology shifts in terms of activity-based learning, problem or project-based learning, theme-based learning. These are all techniques in which we can engage learners to move away from rote learning. And the teacher talks less and hears more.
Yeah, great. So actually, in the interest of time and allowing more questions, what I'm going to do is just go to the questions, and whichever of the panelists would like to jump in, just go ahead and unmute yourselves and jump in, right? So we have Rajan Sharma next. Rajan, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Good afternoon to all the panelists. It was nice talking with you all. It was a nice session. So just like my question is that, like, as the schools are coming back to normal now, like in Haryana region, the government has ordered from 16th, from 9th to 12th, classes are going to be there, offline mode. Kids are coming to school now. So what should be the plan of the schools right now? Like on which aspect of the students the school is going to be first? On their cognitive skills, on their fine motor skills, on their language skills, or their socio-emotional skills? Like which criteria we have to attend the first when the students are going to approach in the school after 1.5 to 2 years? Or directly same schooling we have to do like we are doing 2 years back, directly to the classes, go with the prayer, syllabus, lectures, tests? Or there should be some new curriculum, new plan the schools has to adopt when the kids are coming after 2 years back to school? Like from 16th, we are opening the school now.
It's going to be a tense moment. Yes. Neerja, would you like to jump in there?
Yes, Rajan, I would say that you can't take the subjects perhaps in a linear manner. So those will probably happen parallelly. But what would be nice for a school to do is a kind of a reorientation and give it a little time to for children and talk about what they have been through, perhaps design some activities around it, give it a little time. And the time is something that a school is going to decide whether it's going to be 1 week or 2 weeks or a couple of days, but do address it, do acknowledge it, and not just jump back right into the earlier mode. So the education and the timetable, all that will have to be, it will continue. But the orientation and placing it in context, framing that for them would perhaps prepare them for the rest of it.
Yeah,
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I would just add that, we all think that when we reopen, or what would you call it? The temptation is to go back to life as we knew it. But the thing is, having gone through these 18 months of life that we never knew could be this way, we're never going to go back to life as we knew it. And I think for schools and all workplaces to understand that and accommodate what new needs emerge, right? We don't even know what children are going to feel when they come back into school. So allow those spaces for uncertainty and allow some flexibility in the routine as we would like it to come back to accommodate those needs that we don't even know exist. So I think that's something I would also add. Yes, so Amrita, would you like to ask you a question? Thanks, Neerja, for that. Yeah, go ahead.
So, ma'am, my father wants to ask a question. Okay. So I'll just hand over the mic to him.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
Good morning. I'm Mohan. My son is a class 11 student, CBSE. My concern is even after the online classes, regular classes, he is more exposed to the laptop screen by watching same or videos, teaching videos of different teachers he is getting online, especially in YouTube and all, rather than focusing on his notebooks, because I think the teachers are encouraging to focus more on the notebooks after the online classes. So whether it is appropriate for him to expose to more on the videos and other extra videos, which is not part of the, of course, it is about chemistry or whatever, whatever subjects, but whether he is going according to the syllabus. The teachers are encouraging to focus on the notebooks rather than watching extra videos and more exposed to the exposure to eyes also, right? So this is my concern.
Usha,
yeah.
May I answer this?
Yes, please go ahead.
I think your young man is very resourceful and very smart. He's going about it the right way. And I have, I'm in the Professional Speakers Association of India. I have a fellow member who is barely 17 years old, and her niche subject is my unschooled ear. She took a couple of years off school, and she's going around the entire country, entire globe, talking about her unschooled ear. She's written a book on it. And there's so many online courses available today. We are discussing schools. I understand that there's diversity in India and there's a disadvantage. Absolutely, not taking away from that. But the fact is that MOOCs, online courses, we are moving towards a space where each one of us will have a personal learning cloud eventually. So these children are going about it the exact way they should be. And they learn. YouTube, how to do is a huge phenomena today. I think they really add to their knowledge. The more they watch these instructional, there's a lot of material that they ought to consume online. That's my view.
I might also add that, yes, there is concern that we're depending overly on online resources, and the kind of reflection that looking at a book and reading text allows is being, lost. So I think, my bias is, of course, for books over videos. So maybe I'm revealing that here. But I think it's also a question of modeling, right? And if parents also show that you can learn from diverse sources, that'll balance things out. But I agree with Neerja that, children often find pleasurable ways to learn that are more productive for them than the old ways that we learned, by. And I think Simran's point about, we shouldn't expect our children to learn the way we did is perhaps well taken there. So yeah, so I would go by Neerja's advice, not by my bias. And thanks for that question. So can we move to the next question from Lalita?
How will online teaching reach out to the children who cannot even afford for a smartphone? Because there are so many people who are below the poverty line in our country. So under regular mode, yes, it has been working out because there was sharing of resources and technology in the school premises itself. But now, how can we make the technology available to the children who belong to the EWS category?
Sheela, I think, had answered that in her previous question, but would you like to add anything to your earlier point, Sheela?
No, I don't have anything more to add, but I'm not sure if Lalita was there during the time this question was answered. So yes, Lalita, we did talk about the digital divide and the fact that we all have a responsibility to ensure that this gap is kind of filled. So it could be community individual initiatives to provide devices and data. It could be community learning centers that are technology enabled. It could be corporations and CSR activities of companies where they take this up as an activity to bridge the gap. So it's a multifarious approach that we need to ensure that the gap is filled. But you're very right that there is a gap and it needs filling. And of course, there are national broadcasting systems also at work. So yeah, it combined and public-private partnership together, we hope eventually.
May I answer?
Because
if I can just add to this, I think Lalita, what your concern could also be addressed by you reaching out, like Sheela has pointed out, to these different options that are available. But I think reaching out to them, having a dialogue either within your community, and I think that sense of community over time, is getting more and more lost. But I think virtually online, there are many platforms also where these kinds of issues can be raised. There are companies, like she said, CSR initiatives. So I think connecting with the right people, I think that if you know there's a target group of people who need this support, connecting them with the right people, I think that would be a huge thing that you could do. So I think that is important.
May I answer this?
Yes, sorry, please.
Wishwa.org is a platform which is coming up soon. And within a month or month and a half, we will be having a vertical called giving materials. So those who have old computers, old laptops, can give it to those people who are applying for them on this platform, number one. There are IT companies which dispose of old computers by 5,000 and all. So Wishwa.org will soon be coming up with the platform, with a page exclusively addressing this issue.
Okay, so I think we have time just for one more question, because I know our panelists have given up like pretty much most of their mornings. So we will have to end at some point. So can I ask Vindhya to unmute and ask a question?
This question I'm asking as a parent. I have a 10-year-old son. So the challenge I'm finding is during the online classes, when the teacher asks a question and asks them to think, instead of putting on their thinking caps, they immediately open a tab and Google the answers. And second thing is, they are very much addicted to the screens, whether it be for information or entertainment purpose. In the discussion, you had said that it is important to have offline activities, physical activities. While as a parent, I am trying my best to, spend time with my child and involve him in other activities. It is so happening that the moment I'm sitting with him and doing the activities, but then he loses interest immediately within 40 minutes, 1 hour. And then it's getting difficult to, bring him back to these activities. And he's going back to the screen every now and then. what is it that I can do a little better to make him stay off the screen?
I'm sure one of the other panelists will also have something to say, but I just wanted to add that this morning, incidentally, I was listening to this podcast where they played a clip of this song, which goes something like, I gave my iPad to my child when he was 2 years old to keep him out of my way when I was cooking. And now he's addicted to the screen. So in some ways, I think this is a big problem, right? It's not a problem that has only been generated by the pandemic, but of course it's been exacerbated it's been made more serious by the fact that we have to also learn on screen. So there are two parts to your question. One is about the learning, right? And I would say, like Simran had mentioned kind of indirectly earlier, even the act of going to Google to find the answer for that question is possibly contributing to some learning.
Yes.
So that might be one way to think about it. But yeah, would Simran or any of the others like to jump in?
I agree entirely. If children know where to find the answer to a question that is asked, then that is good learning. That's a skill that they know how to find the answer. The trick would be perhaps to set a question which comes from the child's mind, which is ungoogleable. And that's the creativity of the teacher, that in addition to answers that can be Googled, as Simran also said, there should be answers which cannot be found anywhere, for which the child has to think. And that's the kind of experiment that educators can start doing now. So the more further away your answer is from any kind of availability in the source, whether it's in the textbook or on Google, the more further away it is, the more you will encourage the child to think, which means ask for opinions, ask for new ideas.
Encourage
like
them to
go higher up in the higher order thinking skills.
Yeah, also to draw on their own experience and their immediate environment for answers. So
yeah, if I can just add one point here, I think this resonates a lot with me because my nephew was similarly addicted and my sister made him go through a whole detox phase in the summer holidays. I understand the concern because it's not just learning, it's also entertainment, and that also then ends up reducing physical activity. So I think having that dialogue with the child, explaining why you want to, be that cruel parent who wants to snatch the device away for some time and how it's healthy for them. I think that negotiation also perhaps does need to happen somewhere. And it's a part of, disciplining the child perhaps. So here maybe I sound like a traditionalist. Learning, fine. Entertainment, limited. How many hours, how much time? Helping the child self-regulate, because that's what it is, because otherwise
Absolutely.
they are on the devices constantly. So that self-regulation, having that conversation and then trying to help the child, easing the child into self-regulating is important.
Yeah. So I think we're actually going to have to stop with that, but I see there's just one more. Okay, that's fine. Because it's been a long session, and I do have to thank all the panelists and to Wishwa for making this possible. And if you would like, to continue the conversation, do write to us at Teacher Plus, and we'll see if we can, maybe have some forum where we can, have a back and forth.